New Year's resolutions, prayer, and mental health. What do those three things have in common? How do those three things relate? That's what we're talking about today on the podcast. So let's lean in and find out. New Year's resolution, Stephen. Do you still do those? Is that a thing you still do? I could see you as being a dude like back when New Year's resolutions were really popular, as like having 12 of them and actually doing all 12. You're just one of those guys, high achiever. Do you still do that? You still make New Year's resolutions?
Yeah, the thing about them is you don't do them unless you tell others what they are. Like
Right.
There's that accountability thing.
Mm-hmm.
So if anybody has goals and New Year's resolutions, man, if you haven't told 10 people about what those are, you're probably not going to do them. So
That's good advice.
That's kind of the thing I see.
Yeah,
about,
from somebody
about the
that's a high
goals.
achiever, or at least that I think of as a high achiever.
I am
There's some
goal
advice.
oriented.
Yeah.
I am goal, like you set a goal and
So now I know how to get Stephen to do something. Okay, it's
Yeah.
set a goal for him. All right, I like that. Know how you're motivated. Yeah, I'm not a big New Year's resolution.
it's got to be realistic because I'm a pessimist.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. He is also a realistic pessimist. Man, I'm just not a New Year's resolutions guy. Like I one time I tried to do it back years ago, and I probably because I didn't really tell many people, and I probably didn't even set a realistic goal, and so I didn't do it. But ever since then, I've just started to talk about the way I wanted to be instead of what I wanted to do. It's like, who did I want to be at the end of 2024? I mean, obviously that was years ago, so it wasn't 2024. But then doing things that will help form the person I want to be. So like one example would be reading books. I was reading a lot of books, and so because I wanted to be a certain type of person, and so I read more books during the year rather than like watching, movies or something in my free time. So just like a little simple steps towards the goal.
Or some people say they want to read so many books a year, and I say, hey, just make the goal be a reader.
Right.
Like,
right.
That's
Instead of set the number, just be like, I want to be somebody that
there's an
loves
outcome
to read.
of a person that
Right. Right. It's all about maybe being and not doing. But I was reading this really interesting article from Forbes Health about New Year's resolutions, and it was not even thinking about prayer, but as I was reading through this, I thought, wow, that has a lot of connection to it. And so in this article that was released from Forbes Health, it was showing this changing trend in New Year's resolutions over the years, saying that now, let me just say this, Stephen, if I had to ask you, what do you think in years past are the most common New Year's resolutions?
Oh, it's always something to do with physical, whether it's losing weight, gaining muscle, or something like that.
Eating better,
or it's something
physical health,
something with money. There's always like health and wealth, and then there might be something that's just something to do with
Yeah. Well, you would be correct based off this article, because that's in this study that they did. They said that in years past, it was always physical stuff, physical health.
Yeah.
But now they're starting to see this changing trend in New Year's resolutions where now the focus is on mental health rather than physical health.
That's very interesting.
It is. It is. It's really interesting to think about. I guess because we've talked about that so much as a society, it's become so important in the United States that
I think
it's
that's
a focus now.
reflecting the younger generation too, because usually
that's
people
also
that set
very
goals are the people in 20s, 30s,
Right.
40s.
Right, and a lot of the younger generation has a lot of mental health struggles, and so maybe that is part
I
of
included
it too,
40s in there because I'm 40 right now. But let's be realistic. It's the
Right.
people in their 20s
Shout out
and
to
30s.
all the 40s that were like, hey, he included us in the young people.
Where the hell?
Yeah. No, I think you're probably right about that. But this article wasn't talking as much about why as just the stats behind it. But I thought it was so interesting that the focus is shifting from physical health to mental health. And so as I was thinking about it, I thought, well, if that's the case, if we want to focus on inside and not outside, which I think is a great thing, then the focus in the new year should be prayer. Even if we're considering mental health, for the whatever the percentage was in this article that talked about the percent change of people who are wanting to focus on mental health, like even for those people, like the focus should be prayer. And I think the reason why, I know the reason why is because that's what Jesus did. Jesus in Matthew 6, his Sermon on the Mount, it's a pretty popular passage for things like mental health, for things like anxiety. It's verse 25 through 34. We won't read it all, but he goes on to talk about being anxious and worrying about our life, the things we're going to eat, things we're going to drink, the things we're going to wear.
Basic stuff.
Just basic needs, and the anxieties we can have. But what's so interesting is you sort of zoom out of Matthew 6 and to see this passage, not verse by verse, but kind of as a whole. And in it, at the very end, he sort of contrasts the idea of being anxious with the idea of seeking God and his kingdom. And he says that it's almost as if he's saying the opposite of being anxious is seeking God. The opposite of being anxious is seeking God's kingdom. He says, seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things will be added unto you in Matthew 6, verse 33. It also reminds me of Philippians 4. That's a famous verse about prayer, and it's a 21 Days of Prayer podcast favorite. I don't know if we've talked about it yet, but here we go. That's Philippians 4, 6, and 7, where Paul's writing. He says, before you be anxious, he says, do not be anxious about anything, but in everything, through prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God. And the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. It's the idea of, instead of focusing on mental health, focus on God. And then watch how the mental health portion is affected. It's almost kind of like the way I was talking about. I was focused on the person I wanted to be, not the things I was going to do. And so rather than focusing on the problem, which was I wanted to be the type of person that read more books, I was focusing on, my problem is not I should read more, it's that I want to be that type of person. And so then there were steps I took along the way. And I think it's sort of the same idea here. Jesus is saying, don't focus on all the things that you don't have or all the things that depress you or worry you. The focus should instead be on God and his kingdom as we think about prayer. I thought that was an incredibly helpful tip to think about.
It really works too. This could just be some advice that's, well, don't look at that, look at this. This isn't one of those bait and switch kind of concepts. It really has. And just me personally, I went through a season of anxiety and not being able to sleep, which then affects your stress levels. And then you can get into depression after that.
Snowballs,
and it's just a cycle that can go on. But I always remember feeling like the only thing that would help in the moment is if I could not think about my problems or what I was stressing about and actually think about God. Mm-hmm. And so that's when I was waking up earlier to just spend time with God, go to him with all my cares.
Right.
And ultimately, like once I put him out there, I wouldn't mention him again. It was just a little tactic, because that's interesting that we're talking about this, because I remember that actually being a thing. I didn't want to just talk about those things. I just wanted to be with God.
Right. Yeah. It's not even a focus on those things while you're with God. Yeah.
It reminds me of Peter walking out on the water when he's able to do the miracle, to do the impossible, when he's focused on God. But as soon as he's looking sideways and looking at the storm, sees how big the waves are, and sees what's actually actually in the midst of him, just down there, down there. And I think there's a lot of implications in that, but it really is something that you have to know that God's with you in the storm. And those daily needs that God promises to provide for you, the thing is, those are daily. You're going to need them again tomorrow and the next day and the next day. But the promise is that we have God even in the midst of those. And so to be a person of prayer has got to be something of our goal. Otherwise, we're just trying to put a Band-Aid over some of the issues that we have in life. I just want to fix this. I want to fix that and fix that. And actually, it could be really dangerous for you to solve all those problems and not have God, because then you will feel like you don't need God for anything.
Right.
And so Satan will love you sometimes to accomplish your goals and all your resolutions and get everything you wanted in life without God.
Right.
Where are you going to fit God in? What do you need him for?
Yeah, I mean, your life could be defined as a success, but not be saved, and you wouldn't have God, and he's the most valuable thing we could have. And so I think about David too, Psalm 142. He's in a cave hiding out from his enemies. I mean, this is a time in David's life where he's major struggle. And Psalm 142, he says things like, my spirit faints within me. I'm brought very low. I mean, this is like mental anguish, right? Mental health. But what he does is, instead of sit in this cave and start planning out strategies for what he's going to do, how he's going to survive, and focus on these things, he turns to God in prayer and writes Psalm 142 that we have in our Bibles. And so it's just another good example of when mental health is the focus, and mental health becomes the focus. I mean, it sounds simple, but that's true. But when we start to take our focus off of those things and onto God and apply that with our prayer life, then, as you said, I mean, that's a powerful personal testimony there to say that it was very true for you. And so I think it's a helpful tip for us in prayer, especially as we start a new year.
Yeah, I'm just thankful for the times that we know God's always with us. and that he's available to us. But ultimately, a lot of times we just push him aside and we do focus on the problems too much in our lives. But I just want to encourage you today. I know mental health is something that is very prevalent in today's day because of everything going on, all the distractions and everything. And so that's probably something that's been on your mind a whole lot. And it probably is a really good idea to think about how to get through that and past that. But today's encouragement is to go to the Lord and focus on him and be the person that is just with the Lord in the midst of it all.